Something out there moved, and every quiet alarm in deep space lit up like a heartbeat. If you like stories that don't play nice with sleep, hit subscribe now and settle in. This one is slow, cold, and true to the last shiver. We thought Oumuamua was over. A weird footnote. A fly-through. It came in fast, didn't act like a comet, didn't act like a rock, and then it left. No tail, no flare. Just that strange little nudge as it drifted away, like it was catching a ride on sunlight. People argued. People forgot. The sky went back to being a sky. Years later, after the headlines were gone and the world had moved on, the listening never stopped. Not really. Think of all the dishes pointed into the dark every night. Big white bows and spinning arrays, the kind that creak in the wind and hum when you stand too close. Most nights they catch noise. Bursts from quasars, whispers from our own satellites. The old hiss of the universe just being the universe. And then something different cut through. It didn't crackle. It didn't roar. It tapped. A faint, patient rhythm, like a finger on a table you can't quite see. It came in below the usual junk, tucked under the static like a secret. One dish heard it first, then another on a different continent, then a third that wasn't supposed to be listening at that band at all. By morning, the timestamps lined up. Same pattern, same drift, same patch of sky, not where Oumuamua had been seen, but where it should be now if it had kept going. The first guess was easy. Interference. You always blame the wire before you blame the cosmos. But the cables were clean. The local radios were quiet. The satellites were nowhere near that track. So the signal got moved to a whiteboard in a small room with no windows. A couple of people who live on coffee and plots started asking the old questions. Is it human? Is it natural? If it's neither, what then? They zoomed in on the beat. The gaps between the taps weren't random. They were prime. Tiny stacks of 2, 3, 5, 7. The amplitude rose and fell on a curve that mapped to a constant. We teach in school, but don't think about much after. A circle, a ratio, the way light bends. It was simple, which made it hard to ignore. Space doesn't do simple by accident. That should have been the end of it. Note the oddity, publish a careful line or two, and move on. But someone had an old file open on another screen. A recording of the greeting we loaded onto the golden record in 1977. Hello from the children of planet Earth. A hello soaked in tape, hiss, and hope. They ran both tracks together out of habit. The room went very still. You couldn't call it a copy. It didn't match. But down low, way under the noise, the shape of the phrase was there. Slowed, stretched, turned sideways in the math, but there, our hello. Like a reflection across time. Not a message you hear. A message you feel. At first, nobody said the word. Nobody wanted to be the first mouth in the room to shape it. But the question curl was there in every face, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Was this a reply? That night, more dishes were pointed into the same dark. A few of them were private. A few of them belonged to groups that denied they listen at all. Across the ocean, a small team pulled down an old rack of drives nobody had touched in years and went hunting for ghosts. Sometimes the cleanest answers hide in dusty places. The second thing arrived while the first was still being unwrapped. A weaker pulse came in from a slightly different angle. The beat was similar, but the spacing shifted, like the pattern was speaking with two hands at once. Someone overlaid the two and watched the noise cancel out. The peaks lined up. The valleys filled. A bigger shape rose out of the static. It didn't look like a star map. It didn't look like a picture. It looked like time ticks at intervals we live inside without thinking. Jupiter's radio storms, the slow glow of Saturn's poles, a little spike where our own fault lines twitch. Not where we are, when we are. That's when the conversation in the room changed. If this was a map of events, not places, then it wasn't guiding us somewhere. It was telling us when to listen. Which means something out there either knew our sky very well, or it was built to learn as it went. We've all seen how the internet eats stories. One blog post becomes 10, tweets becomes 100 comments, becomes a mess. Not this time. Open files started disappearing. Mirrors of mirrors went dark. A public data set spun like a coin and then blinked out with a maintenance banner that stayed up longer than any maintenance ever should. Forums where amateurs trade raw captures went quiet. The people who usually talk didn't. And the people who never talk talked to each other. But you can't put a lid on the sky. A small university radio lab that never gets invited to the big table posted a heat map of the band they'd been scraping all week. You had to squint to see it, but the cold spot was there a notch, where the background hiss dipped at perfectly even steps, like someone was pressing a key that damped the noise instead of adding to it. That notch marched across the graph as Earth turned, and when they ran the math, the motion traced an invisible object in a place we thought was empty. Infrared surveys were dragged into the light. A handful of frames, years apart, had little smudges where no smudges should be. We missed them before because they were small, or because the algorithm we wrote to find things told us not to look. But lined up, they made a path. Not bright, not hot, steady. The kind of steady a rock can't keep if it's tumbling. The kind of steady a sail can keep if it's held. It gets inside your head. When you flip through those images back to back, the stars hold steady. The dead pixels stay dead. The smudge goes. The smudge returns a year later, a little farther on, calm as a breath. One frame shows a tiny dip like a blink, right when our own planet sent a burst of radar through that part of space decades ago. The timing made the hair on one scientist's arm stand up, and she didn't hide it. She wrote the time down. Then she wrote it again. By the end of the week, the story had 2 tracks. On one track, the official voices used careful words: anomaly, artifact, ongoing analysis. On the other track, people who sleep beside telescopes were not sleeping much at all. A quiet email would land at 3 a.m. Check the subband at this offset. Look for harmonics here. Don't point the array too long. Just watch. No panic. No certainty. Just that word again folded into all the others. Reply. Here's the part that makes the floor feel thin beneath your feet. When they cleaned the signal all the way down and ran it through a transform that unwraps cycles into shapes, the shape stopped being a beat and started being a curve. Not a perfect circle, not a straight line, but something between, like the spiral of a shell or a galaxy arm drawn with a ruler that keeps changing its mind. The spacing of the turns matched the gaps in the old anomalies we found and the timing of the new ones that just started. It wasn't pointing at us, it was wrapping around us. You can choose to see meaning anywhere. A face in clouds, a voice in wind. We're good at that. But there's a difference between a guess and a pattern that keeps surviving your attempts to kill it. Every time they shuffled the data, the bones of that spiral stayed. Every time they subtracted a different kind of noise, the same soft outline returned, like something underwater that won't rise all the way to the surface. At sunrise on the 6th day, a small station on an island picked up a flutter. It wasn't in the radio band at all. It was in the very low range, the kind of slow undulation you usually see when the planet itself is singing lightning strikes, ringing the world, waves pulling on the shore. The flutter had the same cadence as the space signal, slowed by a factor that matched the delay between our receivers. If you set both tracks side by side and let them walk, they walked in step. This is where the story starts to feel less like astronomy and more like a mirror. If something out there was tapping in time with us, then the question stopped being what is it and started being what is the surface between us made of? Because mirrors aren't only glass. They can be fields, they can be dust, they can be anything that lets a rhythm pass through and return with a piece of us caught in it. A private observatory in the desert tried something risky. They played the pattern back. Not loud, not long, just a small sweep pointed into the same patch of dark. 2 minutes later, a notch appeared in their own noise where no notch should be. It held for exactly the length of the reply and then disappeared. Nobody called it an answer, not in writing. But in the hallway, one voice said it and nobody corrected him. Meanwhile, the second object, the cold shadow that wasn't a shadow, kept showing up right where the timing model said it would be. It didn't glow, it didn't flare. It just made nearby nothing slightly less nothing in a way our instruments could smell. A thermal line a half-degree wide laced across the field like a seam. If you turned the exposure down, it was gone. If you turned it up too far, it smeared. Only a gentle hand made it appear. Only a patient one could keep it in frame. That can't be a rock, someone said, finally. Rocks don't do steady for that long. Nobody argued. Then what is steady in the dark? Someone else asked. The answer nobody wanted to say arrived anyway. A thing that knows how to hold still. By now the room had a rule. Don't name it. The minute you name a thing, you start seeing your word instead of what is there. So they stuck to action words. Drift, tap, mirror, slow. Listen. They printed the timing model and taped it to a cabinet with a strip of blue painter's tape. There were ticks in the future with blank labels waiting beside them. None of the labels said hope. None said fear. Most said watch. If you're listening for the jump scare, it's not here. That's not how the sky works. The sky takes little bites and chews for a long time. But there are moments when the long chew becomes a swallow. One came the next night. A deep field array that stares so wide it can count the glare around the glare caught a thin scar in the light. It was narrow, very narrow, and it ran straight, not like a trail, more like a hairline crack across glass. It sat at the angle the model predicted for the second source. It brightened in tiny steps blue, then red, then blue again, as if two tones were taking turns painting the same line. No one called it a beam. No one called it a sail. They called it a seam. Because sometimes you don't see a thing itself. You only see where it's stitched into what surrounds it. They marked the time. They marked the frequency. They marked the switch from blue to red and back in a notebook that wasn't connected to anything at all. When you're careful, you learn which tools to leave offline. And all the while, the first pattern, the one from Oumuamua's path, kept tapping, soft, patient. The gaps told a story of when to look, not where. And every time a tick lined up with one of our own loud moments' auroras flaring over a pole, a burst of radio from Jupiter, the slow breath of Earth's field, it felt less like spying and more like keeping time together, the way two people walk without talking and still manage to match their steps. You might think this is the point where someone steps up to a microphone and tells the world. But big microphones have big locks. Instead, a smaller voice did something braver. He sent 5 plots to a friend with no subject line at all. The plots were clean, neat, and a little boring if you didn't know what to look for. If you did, they were the opposite of boring. They were a finger on the glass from the other side. Tonight, we're going to let the room go dim, let the pace stay slow, and keep listening. The story you and I are inside now doesn't need a loud drum. It needs a steady pulse. Oumuamua was a mystery that left. Something along its path is a mystery that stayed. And in the quiet between the taps, like a breath held in a chest you can't see, there's a feeling I can't name yet, but you can feel right now if you sit very still. This wasn't an accident, and it wasn't the start. The start happened years ago when we said hello to the dark and pretended the dark had no memory. This very soft, very careful rhythm is what it sounds like when the dark remembers. Breathe slow. Keep your eyes soft. We're only at the first bend of the spiral. The night after the second signal, the sky refused to rest. Instruments that had been steady for years started picking up low tremors in the radio bands. Nothing loud, just a slow pulse that felt like a heartbeat buried inside static. It wasn't coming from a single direction anymore. It was everywhere, wrapped around Earth like a whisper that didn't care who was listening. Every time the signal brushed through the static, temperature sensors ticked up by a fraction. Not enough to alarm anyone on paper, but enough for engineers to notice. They logged it, shrugged, and carried on. But in a few observatories, those tiny shifts were stacking up. Every hour, another decimal. Every night, another blink. And then the red light on a telescope in Hawaii flickered twice, not from a fault, but from a manual override that no one admitted to initiating. A recording file began capturing without authorization. The system labeled it automatically, Object Reacquisition Attempt Oumuamua Pathline. What appeared wasn't a streak, not a flare, not even light. It was an absence, a perfect slit in the backdrop of stars, as if someone had drawn a razor through the night and peeled it open. Behind it, faint color bled out. Blue at first, then a pale, almost sickly red. They weren't reflections. They were signatures, electromagnetic trails bending around something massive. Scientists used to say Oumuamua was small, a few 100 meters long, maybe the size of a football field. But this wasn't small. This was colossal. The readings implied something hundreds of kilometers wide, but too geometrically perfect to be a rock. The edges were straight, the angles repeating, almost mechanical. It wasn't tumbling, it was steady. When they filtered the signal through new Fourier layers, a hidden sub-pattern emerged, a faint harmonic buried under the main pulse, like a low hum woven through the rhythm. The ratio of the two frequencies matched one of the constants used in biological neurosignaling. To some, it looked like data. To others, it looked like thought. Then, for the first time, a sound came through. Not words, not music, just a tone, a deep, rising vibration that started at the edge of hearing and climbed until it felt like it was inside your head rather than outside it. For 22 seconds, every radio dish across 3 continents caught the same noise. Then, silence. But the spectrum analyzer didn't show an end. It showed a loop as if the sound hadn't stopped, only slipped beneath the frequencies we can hear. The strangest thing wasn't the sound, it was the reflection. Half an hour after the signal faded, deep-sea sensors in the Pacific registered identical frequencies vibrating through the water. There was no storm, no seismic event, just a perfect mirror of what came from the stars, rippling through Earth's ocean like an echo trapped under the surface. People like to say that space is silent. But silence, it turns out, can travel. The data analysts started calling the signal the hum. It fit something that wasn't speech, wasn't noise, just a presence that pressed on every instrument at once. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, the hum triggered an emergency synchronization across systems that weren't even online. Machines woke up, old data caches opened, hidden scripts ran checks that no one remembered writing, and buried deep inside a forgotten data archive, one created back when Voyager 2 was still sending strong transmissions, a dormant file uncompressed itself. Its timestamp matched the first day Oumuamua was seen back in 2017. The file's name was a single word, return. When they opened it, it wasn't text. It was a diagram, a spiral drawn in data points, each one corresponding to a specific date and frequency range. The outermost curve stopped right at today's date. That's when the realization hit them. The hum wasn't random. It was counting down. The intervals between pulses were shrinking by microseconds every hour. Not much, but enough that extrapolated, it formed a convergence line. In 6 days, the pulse would synchronize perfectly with Earth's own Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic heartbeat of our planet. Nobody knew what would happen when those two waves met. Across the network, classified channels came alive. Observatories received new operating orders. Point away from the source. Cease outbound transmissions. Do not engage. But one facility didn't stop. A small array in Chile kept recording, kept watching. because curiosity doesn't obey commands. What they saw next wasn't a signal. It was a shadow moving against the light of distant stars. The object wasn't leaving anymore. It was turning. Oumuamua, or whatever it had become, was aligning its trajectory. And its new path wasn't random. It was coming back. The voice logs from that night are all redacted, except one sentence left uncensored in a private transcript. It's greater than, if it's returning, it's not lost. And in the hours that followed, the hum grew louder. Not in volume, in feeling. Screens flickered, clocks desynced. Machines with no radio input started vibrating in rhythm. And somewhere, far beneath the Pacific, the same tone rose again deeper now, as if the ocean itself was learning the pattern. It's no longer a question of what Oumuamua was. The real question is what it's becoming, and we've already started to feel it. By the third night, the hum wasn't just sound, it was rhythm, threading itself through everything that could vibrate. Metal, glass, even the quiet air inside sealed control rooms seemed to breathe in sync with it. Engineers who'd been awake for days started describing the same impossible feeling, like the walls themselves had a pulse. When they cross-referenced data from magnetometers across the globe, the results didn't fit any known pattern. Earth's magnetic field was flickering. A microscopic oscillation that repeated exactly in time with the Oumuamua signal. Every 10 seconds, the readings peaked, not high enough to cause damage, but too precise to be coincidence. It was as if the planet was being gently tuned. NASA's monitoring stations started seeing ghost readings, brief flashes in orbital telemetry data that came and went in milliseconds. Something was reflecting radar pings that shouldn't have been reflected. When the data was layered and slowed down, those blips formed a shape, a ring faint, vast, and circling our planet at an altitude just beyond geosynchronous orbit. Whatever it wasn't debris. It was organized. And then came the strangest part. The hum stopped for 6 whole minutes. Total silence across every frequency. Then, just once, a deep bass tone rolled through the bands, a tone that matched the precise resonance of Earth's iron core. Thousands of miles away, in Chile, a researcher stood outside under the desert sky when he felt the vibration through his chest like a drumbeat echoing from below. It didn't come from the ground. It came from above. The stars didn't move, but something between them shimmered. Through the large array telescope, a new object came into view. Not tumbling like Oumuamua, not darting, just hovering black against black, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. At first, it looked flat, but as the lens adjusted, edges began to glow faintly blue, as if electric charge were outlining its geometry. A massive structure, easily hundreds of kilometers long, its edges too sharp, its symmetry too deliberate. They called it the Companion. It wasn't following Oumuamua's old path anymore, it was orbiting with Earth, and its orientation was locked on us. By the next sunrise, the hum returned deeper, slower, synchronized with the Earth's rotation. Power grids began to experience fractional drops every time the hum reached its low point. Phones buzzed without incoming calls. Clocks gained or lost seconds and corrected themselves instantly, as if something unseen had taken control of timekeeping itself. When scientists tried to triangulate the signal again, they couldn't. It wasn't coming from deep space anymore. It was coming from above us, reflected from that vast black ring now hidden in the daylight sky. That's when the first image appeared. A European telescope caught a shadow crossing the moon, long and thin, moving impossibly fast. It wasn't a meteor or satellite. It moved like a silhouette in motion, silent, deliberate. Frame by frame, the analysts watched as a faint glow trailed behind it. Green at first, then blue, then red, like a pulse through veins. It wasn't just light. It was information, encoded, structured, intentional. Then, one of the old Voyager antennas, dormant for years, flicked on without command. Its dish turned slowly toward that shadow. The system log later showed an input command no one typed, listening. And as the hum grew louder, a pattern began to form in its modulation, small gaps at equal intervals, like breath pauses between words that haven't been spoken yet. Oumuamua was back, but it wasn't alone. It had brought something with it. The power stations that aligned directly beneath the orbiting object started recording transient electromagnetic surges, not enough to cause harm, but enough to register like fingerprints. Each surge lasted precisely 3 seconds and matched the intervals between the pulses from the original hum. Someone or something was syncing with us. But syncing for what? It wasn't invasion. It wasn't contact. It felt more like calibration, a system checking its link before sending the next command. At that moment, across multiple observatories, the hum modulated and the pattern of 3 descending tones emerged. Soft, rhythmic, unmistakably deliberate. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was speech. If you closed your eyes and slowed the playback, it almost sounded like breathing, mechanical, ancient and slow. Like something that had been asleep for a very long time was stirring awake. And from the Pacific sensors, a ripple began spreading outward again. Low, cold, perfect, echoing the same pattern. Whatever was orbiting us wasn't just responding to Earth, it was using Earth. It was as if Oumuamua had turned us into an antenna. We built telescopes to look outward, but now it seemed something had found a way to look back through us. And every pulse, every shiver in the magnetosphere was getting stronger. The countdown had begun. By the 4th night, the world itself had started to hum. From satellites to smartphones, from ocean cables to weather stations, every signal, every device that could carry current began trembling under the same strange pulse. And this time, it wasn't faint. It was everywhere. At first, it came as a series of soft disruptions, static cutting into live broadcasts, shortwave radios producing slow, deliberate tones, GPS units briefly freezing as if holding their breath. Then came the pattern. 3 ascending pulses, 1 descending, then silence. And it repeated every 68 seconds across the planet. In labs buried beneath mountains, scientists stared at monitors flashing between chaos and order. The pulse wasn't noise anymore. It was a language. NASA's Deep Space Network decoded the modulation first. The signal had embedded harmonics layers of data stacked like sheets of glass. When they filtered them apart, something unexpected appeared. Within the waveform was structure, geometry, not random, not human. It resembled a helix. Not DNA, but the mathematical shape of communication itself, a spiral repeating with prime number intervals. Its pattern matched the very constants used in the Voyager Golden Record. Someone, somewhere, had mirrored our greeting, but it wasn't playback. It was evolution. The original "Hello from the children of planet Earth" had been transformed, slowed, stretched, rewritten in frequencies no human ear could hear. When converted into visible light spectrum, it produced color pulses blue, red, then a sharp flare of white, repeating in threes. A hidden message nested inside the hum. Every third sequence ended with an irregular peak, a spike that, when mapped spatially, formed a rotating shape, a long, slender body with edges too symmetrical for a rock. It was Oumuamua's silhouette, but magnified, replicated, multiplied as if showing versions of itself scattered across the galaxy. For a moment, every person staring at that holographic render understood the same quiet horror. Oumuamua was not one object. It was part of a network. And then the pattern began to change again. The frequencies deepened lower, slower, rumbling through the crust of the Earth itself. Seismographs twitched across the Pacific. Not tremors. Resonance. As if the planet was being tuned, every mountain, every ocean vibrating to match the interstellar signal. The ring structure above Earth brightened in response. Cameras captured faint red arcs slicing through the clouds at midnight, not lightning, but ionized air glowing under magnetic compression. And through that shimmer, the sky seemed to breathe. People across the world reported the same impossible sight, stars bending, warping, like seen through moving water. Some claimed they could hear the hum without machines, just standing in open air, low, endless, familiar. In the data, the pulses began counting backward as though a sequence was nearing completion. Scientists thought it was a countdown. It wasn't. It was synchronization. At 0, the hum stopped. Every radar, every radio, every line of code froze for exactly 9 seconds. Then silence, the deep, terrifying kind of silence that feels alive. And then, above the Pacific, the clouds parted. Infrared satellites picked up a glow, circular, expanding, structured. In the middle of that ring was an object unlike anything ever seen before. Metallic, vast, and rotating slowly, revealing surfaces engraved with pulsing blue veins of light. The ring we thought was orbiting Earth wasn't a ring at all. It was a door. As the frequency stabilized, a new tone emerged higher this time, crystalline, echoing through the upper atmosphere. It wasn't random, it wasn't language, it was a call. The response came 13 minutes later, from deep space, a second source, stronger, cleaner, closer, traveling fast, too fast. Trajectory, inbound, from the same direction, Oumuamua first arrived, the two signals began mirroring each other, pulsing like heartbeat and echo. And when the timing matched perfectly, the massive object above Earth flared its edges glowing white-blue, illuminating the night side of the planet like dawn had arrived early. A single data burst hit every major network simultaneously. No one knows where it came from, but it left one phrase burned across screens in binary translation. "We heard you." And then, darkness. The hum vanished. Power grids flickered back online. The sky went still. No radar, no reflection, no trace. Whatever had been there, it was gone. But as astronomers frantically scanned the sky, one final anomaly appeared. Oumuamua's original trajectory, the one leading out of the solar system, was empty. Yet a new object had appeared in nearly the same path, smaller but moving faster, heading toward Earth. It wasn't a return, it was a relay. And for the first time since the hum began, humanity realized something dreadful. We hadn't been contacted. We'd been tested. For days, the skies were empty. No hum, no light, no pulse. It felt as though the universe had held its breath. But the silence didn't last. On the seventh night, a faint glow appeared near the orbit of Jupiter, a cold bluish shimmer, too steady to be a reflection. At first, astronomers thought it was residual solar flare interference, but the coordinates matched exactly where the relay object was expected to pass. Only this time, it wasn't passing. It had stopped. The strange thing wasn't that it halted mid-trajectory, it was that it began to expand, not in motion, but in presence. The infrared scans showed it growing hotter, wider, radiating waves invisible to the eye but not to the instruments. And Earth began to react. Every magnetic reading on the planet shifted by a fraction of a degree, and every satellite in orbit experienced a synchronized 1-second blackout. Power returned instantly, but every clock in low orbit reset to 0 hours, as if time itself had been recalibrated. In Chile, the same research array that first recorded the hum captured something far more complex. A cluster of signals overlapping, echoing one another in patterns too fast for human recognition. When slowed down by a factor of 1,000, it revealed multiple layers, each with a slightly different timing, like voices speaking the same sentence but milliseconds apart. Each voice said the same thing over and over. Synchronization complete. The atmosphere began to flicker. Not visually, electromagnetically. Compasses spun in short, random bursts. Wi-Fi routers began detecting phantom devices with coordinates deep in the Pacific Ocean. GPS systems lost altitude references, showing objects that didn't exist hovering miles above Earth's surface. Something was bending reality, not breaking it, bending it to fit. When the new object approached the inner solar system, telescopes captured its first clear image. It wasn't a comet. It wasn't an asteroid. It looked like a colossal metallic veil, translucent in some angles, reflective in others. Its edges were lined with pulsating blue veins, and its center glowed with a faint rotating ring of red. Inside that ring, light itself seemed to bend inward, as though something enormous was hidden beneath it. NASA's computers attempted to calculate its mass, but the results kept resetting. The numbers climbed, looped, and then produced errors. Mass indeterminate field anomalous. It was like trying to weigh a shadow. The energy radiating from the object reached Earth within hours. Aurora patterns, normally seen at the poles, began to appear along the equator, swirling red and blue lights twisting together like strands of DNA. In the skies over the Pacific, pilots reported a phenomenon that defied explanation: clouds forming concentric rings, glowing faintly with green light, spinning silently as if stirred by invisible machinery. At the same moment, ground-based instruments detected a low, repeating tone, the same tone as before, but this time inverted. The hum wasn't emanating from the object anymore. It was being reflected back by Earth, as if the planet had become a speaker. Oceans began responding next. Satellites monitoring the sea surface recorded geometric patterns forming in the Pacific, vast spirals of bioluminescence, stretching hundreds of miles. The waves weren't moving randomly. They were forming symbols, mathematical spirals, Fibonacci sequences. Someone or something was drawing on the ocean. The relay object had stopped near Mars, perfectly still, its blue veins dimming and brightening in rhythm with the ocean spirals. Every time the Pacific pattern shifted, the object's light responded in sync. It wasn't sending a message. It was receiving one. Then came the first contact, not through sound, not through vision, but through data. Hard drives, offline servers, and disconnected machines began recording new files, random strings of binary code appearing in sectors that hadn't been powered on in years. When decoded, they revealed coordinates, all pointing to a single point deep below the Pacific Ocean near the Tonga Trench. Depth 10,800 meters. The exact same region that first mirrored the Oumuamua signal weeks earlier. Submersible drones sent to investigate lost signal after descending beyond 8,000 meters. Their last transmitted frame showed something glowing beneath the trench, a perfect circle of light, pulsating in rhythm with the object orbiting Mars. The pattern was no longer repeating, it was building. And then, for the first time since this began, the signal from deep space returned. The same repeating phrase as before, 3 ascending tones, 1 descending, but this time with a new sequence appended at the end. When converted to text, it wasn't numbers or coordinates. It was a word, awaken. The sky above Earth brightened once more, blue and red light wrapping the horizon like ribbons of plasma. The world's magnetic poles trembled. Clocks everywhere skipped forward 5 seconds. The countdown had ended, but the transmission had only just begun. The tremors began at dawn. At first, there were barely noticeable gentle vibrations that rippled through the ocean floor near the Tonga Trench. But within minutes, the entire Pacific registered a seismic anomaly unlike anything ever recorded. The shaking didn't behave like an earthquake. It wasn't chaotic. It was measured. Each tremor arrived exactly 90 seconds apart, following the same rhythm as the Oumuamua signal. 3 ascending pulses, 1 descending. Every deep-sea sensor pinged in perfect sync. Every buoy tilted toward the same direction, the center of the trench. Then the temperature readings started to rise. 10 degrees, 15, 20. The water near the seabed began glowing faintly blue, illuminating a radius nearly 5 kilometers wide, and from within that glow, the sonar detected movement. At first, it appeared as static, a shape too massive to fit the grid, too large to even belong there. But as the reading stabilized, a pattern emerged. A circle, perfect, pulsing, alive. The ocean floor began to shift outward, as though something beneath it was breathing. Then, from the darkness, light erupted, a column of liquid fire racing upward through the water like a volcanic plume. But there was no heat, no ash, no debris. Only light spiraling upward in twisting luminous threads. From orbit, the sight was staggering. A vortex of blue and red radiance pierced the ocean, expanding outward like a living aurora, stretching all the way to the upper atmosphere. Every radio, every transmission on Earth went silent for 6 seconds. Then came the pulse. It wasn't from the object near Mars anymore. It was from below. The Tonga Trench had become a transmitter. When scientists finally reconnected their deep-sea data feeds, they realized the impossible. The frequency of the oceanic signal was identical to the electromagnetic heartbeat of the massive structure near Mars. The two were connected. And then, as if answering itself, the structure orbiting Mars began to move. Slowly, gracefully. Its blue veins flared, rotating, forming spirals identical to those rising from the ocean. The data from both sources, space and sea, began syncing in real time, creating a mirrored pattern so precise that the signals could be overlaid like reflections. The object was communicating not to us, but through us. Something massive stirred in the depths. Submersible drones sent for observation captured the faint outline of metallic ridges beneath the light. They weren't random formations. They curved, repeating, like segments of a colossal structure buried in the crust for millennia. And then it moved. The ocean surface began to bulge, rising as though the sea itself were being displaced by something enormous below. Ships within 500 miles reported magnetic interference strong enough to shut down entire navigation systems. Compasses spun violently, GPS froze, and cameras flickered with static as the glowing mass ascended. Through the haze of boiling water and light, it became visible. A vast structure, flat and angular, rose from the deep, its surface etched with intricate geometric lines glowing red and blue. It wasn't built. It was grown like crystal and metal fused into one seamless form. The same markings that once traced across Oumuamua now burned across this rising colossus. For the first time, the world saw it clearly. Not a comet, not a ship, a construct, an ancient machine half buried beneath the Pacific, waiting for a signal that had finally arrived. The water around it evaporated instantly as the structure's core began to hum. Clouds above twisted into spirals. Lightning, not white, but deep scarlet, flickered inside the vortex. The air pressure dropped. The seas withdrew. And the massive structure opened. panels along its surface unfolded like metallic petals, revealing a circular void in its center, blacker than the surrounding sea. The void pulsed once, twice, then emitted a beam of light straight into the sky, connecting with the object orbiting near Mars. For a moment, the two were joined, ocean and space, Earth and the void. The beam vibrated, splitting into fragments of pure light, then merged again. It was like watching two parts of a single machine reconnect after centuries apart. Then came the shock wave. It wasn't sound, it was gravity itself bending. Every object near the Pacific coast lifted for a fraction of a second. The ocean, the air, even the sand beneath people's feet suspended, weightless, before crashing back down. Every transmission cut to black. And in that blackout, a final burst of data passed through every satellite, still alive, a single signal sent simultaneously across all frequencies. When decoded, it wasn't words or numbers. It was an image, a map, not of the stars, but of our solar system. And in the outer edge, past Neptune, a new orbit had appeared. An unknown object, enormous. Moving inward, the Oumuamua event was never about one visitor. It was the first step in something returning. When the construct beneath the Pacific connected with the orbiting object near Mars, something extraordinary and horrifying began to unfold across the planet. At first, it was subtle. Birds migrating thousands of miles off course. Compass needles spinning lazily east when they should have pointed north. Then came the auroras, no longer confined to the poles, but cascading across entire continents in eerie sheets of red and blue. The sky shimmered like a living membrane, rippling as though the atmosphere itself were charged with alien electricity. But this was not weather, it was synchronization. Earth's magnetic field, the invisible shield that protects us from solar radiation, began to change shape. It pulsed, it throbbed. The magnetosphere was no longer aligned with the planet's core, but with something external. Satellites orbiting the planet registered a strange pattern, not random fluctuation, but order. Every 2 minutes, Earth's field pulsed in exact rhythm with the energy signature coming from Mars. NASA and ESA confirmed it simultaneously. The object near Mars wasn't just communicating, it was commanding. The planet was responding. Massive power surges spread through every electrical grid. Devices powered off and on without command. Air traffic radar failed over the Pacific. Submarines reported sonar interference from the depths, deep mechanical sounds echoing from the construct below, rhythmic and deliberate. Then, one by one, the world's radio telescopes began detecting something no one could explain. Earth itself was transmitting. It wasn't a single tone, but a full spectrum low to high frequency, modulated in the exact same way as the signal once detected from Oumuamua. It was as if the planet had become a speaker, relaying a message it didn't write. The waveform was analyzed, filtered, slowed. And when converted to spectrograph, it produced an image, a familiar pattern of repeating geometry. A helix, the same structure embedded in the original Oumuamua transmission. Only now, it wasn't coming from space, it was coming from inside the planet. Geological scans showed the pulse resonating through the Earth's crust, bouncing between tectonic plates like sonar. The frequency matched the heat bloom readings beneath the Pacific. The massive construct was now fully awake. And that's when astronomers noticed something else. The object near Mars was no longer stationary. It was moving again slowly, deliberately, changing orbit, not toward Earth, but into alignment. When plotted on a three-dimensional solar map, its path formed an impossible geometry, a perfect line between the construct on Earth, the object near Mars, and the outer system beyond Neptune. At the other end of that line was something new. A massive body invisible to optical telescopes, but radiating faint infrared light, was moving toward the inner solar system. It wasn't in any previous catalogue. It wasn't a planet. It wasn't a comet. It was something else. Whatever was buried beneath the Pacific and whatever hovered near Mars were acting like receivers. The incoming object was the source. In a quiet conference room deep within NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a computer model ran the trajectory in real time. The results were terrifyingly precise. In just 49 days, the unknown body would cross Neptune's orbit. In 94, it would reach Jupiter, and in less than 130 days, Earth's orbit. When the simulation concluded, the room fell silent. No one spoke. Because the data showed something no one wanted to admit. This was not a collision course. It was a rendezvous. Across the planet, power grids flickered again as the pulse frequency intensified. The construct beneath the Pacific rotated, massive panels shifting into new configurations. The beam linking it to Mars grew stronger, forming a constant column of red and blue light, visible even in daylight. For the first time in human history, Earth had become part of an alien circuit, a living node in a network stretching across the solar system. The question wasn't what Oumuamua was anymore. It was what it had activated. By the time the colossal body breached Neptune's orbit, every telescope on Earth was locked onto it, and every scientist watching wished they weren't. The object wasn't a comet. It wasn't even remotely natural. Its surface absorbed all light, turning it into a silhouette against the faint blue of Neptune's reflected glow. Only the edges shimmered, lined with thin bands of red and electric blue that flickered like circuitry under a pulse. It was so enormous that it dwarfed the planet itself, stretching across nearly a quarter of Neptune's orbit, and it was moving faster than physics should allow. Gravitational readings around it became impossible to calculate. It bent light, distorted radio signals, and disrupted every probe that tried to approach. Its trajectory wasn't curved by gravity, it bent gravity around itself. The first sign of the connection came when Neptune's clouds began to swirl unnaturally. Massive storm systems erupted across the planet, forming a perfect spiral visible from billions of kilometers away. It wasn't a storm, it was a symbol. The same Fibonacci spiral seen in the ocean trench and across the auroras on Earth. The pattern was identical down to the ratios. Within hours, the data confirmed it, the construct beneath the Pacific, the orb near Mars, and the incoming Leviathan beyond Neptune were now synchronized perfectly. Each pulsed at the exact same frequency, a deep infrasonic rhythm that penetrated everything. Earth's oceans rose and fell in response, not from tides or wind, but from resonance. The air thickened. Compass readings vanished. Entire regions experienced time skips, seconds lost, minutes repeating. Reality itself began to stutter. Satellites caught glimpses of impossible phenomena. The stars behind the massive object weren't just being blocked. They were bending, folding, looping back. Astronomers realized what they were witnessing wasn't an object at all, but a boundary, a shell of something that existed partly outside our dimension, its inner structure only visible in fragments. Light didn't reflect off it. It entered it and didn't come out. As it moved closer, its surface began to unfold. Sections of its shell retracted in smooth, geometric motion, revealing layers of intricate design, fractal architecture made of shimmering metallic skin, alive with motion. It wasn't coming toward a sundae. It was aligning with it. NASA's deep space radar arrays confirmed it. The object was positioning itself directly along the heliospheric current sheet, the Sun's electromagnetic equator. That meant one thing: it wasn't random. It understood the solar system's geometry. It was forming a connection point between the Sun, Mars, and Earth. At the same moment, solar readings spiked. The Sun's outer corona began to flare unnaturally, its plasma arcs oscillating between red and blue, just like the object. Solar wind patterns changed direction, not outward, but inward. The Sun was feeding energy into something. On Earth, the construct beneath the Pacific responded instantly. It pulsed once, and the seas drew back for miles, exposing the sea floor for the first time in millions of years. At its center, the metallic surface opened a gaping circular aperture, glowing from within with swirling plasma, identical to the solar corona spectrum. It was a mirror. From orbit, the beam that once reached toward Mars now expanded, branching into multiple streams of red and blue light, one toward Mars, another toward the Sun, and one reaching out to the oncoming Colossus beyond Neptune. They formed a triangle, a perfect mathematical trinity of energy exchange. And then, for the first time, the entire solar system went dim. Stars disappeared. Space turned blacker than black. Every instrument flat-lined. No signal, no radio, no light. For exactly 13 seconds, everything, every photon, every frequency went silent. When it returned, nothing was the same. The massive object was no longer beyond Neptune. It was visible between Jupiter and Saturn. It had moved billions of miles in an instant, and now it was fully awake. Its surface erupted in spirals of crimson and blue energy, like veins of molten light coursing across an unfathomable body. Sensors picked up bursts of radiation that shouldn't exist, particles that ignored the speed of light. Quantum data streams began to glitch. Computer systems on Earth rebooted into symbols. No one could translate repeating hexagonal formations like those found on Saturn's pole. That's when scientists realized it wasn't just moving through space. It was rewriting it. Every orbit in the solar system began to fluctuate slightly, not chaotically, but rhythmically. Like everything, planets, moons, light itself was being tuned. And deep beneath the Pacific, the construct's core began to spin. Not fast, not violently, but with purpose. Each rotation sent waves of magnetic energy that rippled through the Earth's crust, synchronizing with the alien rhythm from the void. The message was clear, even without words. This wasn't invasion. It wasn't exploration. It was integration. Something ancient had arrived not to conquer, but to connect, to finish what Oumuamua had started. The alignment had reached its breaking point. Every frequency across the solar system, light, gravity, sound, magnetism began to collapse into one perfect tone. A single hum that could be felt more than heard. It resonated through oceans, bones, and satellites alike, shaking the foundations of reality itself. The colossal object between Jupiter and Saturn now glowed brighter than either planet, its red and blue veins pulsing in rhythm with the construct beneath Earth's Pacific. The orb near Mars flared one final time, then disintegrated into a mist of energy that streamed directly toward the Sunday. And the Sun responded. Its surface began to ripple like liquid. Solar flares froze in place, curling in mid-space like frozen waves of fire. Then, one by one, sunspots ignited with unnatural symmetry, forming a spiral identical to the alien pattern, repeating across the system. The Earth shook. The construct's aperture widened, exposing an impossible depth beneath it, a black void that seemed to stretch through the planet. The oceans swirled violently, forming a perfect eye above the glowing structure. From orbit, the image was breathtaking. A luminous triangle spanning the entire solar system, the Sun, the Earth, and the Leviathan beyond Saturn, all connected by glowing strands of red and blue plasma that cut through the void like veins of a cosmic body. Then the light turned white. Every color disappeared, swallowed by brilliance. Every frequency peaked, merging into a blinding radiance so intense that instruments burned out trying to measure it. And within that infinite brightness it appeared. A shape, not physical, but undeniable. A vast lattice of light, geometric and infinite, unfolding from within the solar storm. It moved like thought, not matter. It wasn't a ship, not a being, but a presence. Something that had been watching since the beginning of time. Every transmission from satellites, from ships, from observatories, was overridden by a single image, an eye, not human, not biological, a spiral of glowing lines rotating endlessly inward, and then a voice, not in sound, but inside every mind connected to the signal. It is complete. The message wasn't in words. It was emotion calm, vast, and final. A sense of completion, as if the system itself had just booted up after eons asleep. The sun dimmed. The massive object beyond Saturn folded in on itself, collapsing into a single glowing sphere the size of a moon. It spun faster and faster until, with no sound at all, it vanished, leaving behind a ring of light that stretched across the stars like a scar. The beam between Earth and the Sun flickered, then severed. The construct beneath the Pacific began to sink, its glow fading beneath the waves until the ocean swallowed it completely. The seas calmed, the sky cleared, the hum fell silent, and in the stillness, the world exhaled. All data, all signals, all transmissions returned to normal except for one. Deep within NASA's servers, a final pulse appeared on the monitors. A single string of binary code transmitted from nowhere, time-stamped 1 second after the alignment ended. When decoded, it revealed one word: received. The climax wasn't an invasion or destruction, it was contact. The message had been delivered, the response acknowledged. Whatever Oumuamua was, it had done its job. It had awakened the network, and somewhere in the cold dark beyond our sun, something answered back. The silence that followed felt unnatural, like the universe itself had paused to listen. For days, radio telescopes around the world pointed toward the coordinates where the colossal structure had vanished. Nothing. No signal, no radiation, not even cosmic background interference. Just a void, an absence of energy so complete that it felt like a wound in space. But then, faint whispers began to appear. Low-frequency pulses, identical to the ones that first accompanied Oumuamua. Only this time, they didn't come from deep space. They came from Earth. Deep-sea instruments off the coast of the Pacific recorded strange rhythmic vibrations echoing through the ocean floor. The frequency matched the alien pulse down to the 1,000th of a hertz. Something beneath was still alive, still humming. When divers were sent, their equipment failed before they reached the trench. Sonar collapsed into static. Cameras froze mid-frame. The last image transmitted before the blackout showed something glowing faintly in the black water, a circular metallic ring, half buried in sand, turning slowly as if breathing. Meanwhile, astronomers across Chile, Spain, and Hawaii reported a new anomaly. In several stars in the same region where Oumuamua had first appeared were flickering in synchronization, forming what looked like coded intervals. Light as language. And in that silence, humanity realized something profound. This wasn't over. It had never been over. The alignment, the construct, the colossal body, they weren't random events. They were steps in a process, a test, a signal chain. Earth had answered, and now it was part of the network. Months passed. The sky seemed normal again, but subtle things began to change. Aurora lights now appeared closer to the equator, sometimes in perfect spirals. The Schumann resonance, the Earth's natural electromagnetic heartbeat, shifted by 0.6 Hertz, something that had never happened before. And in deep space, telescopes began to pick up faint, structured bursts coming from galaxies millions of light years away. Each burst carried the same 3 tones embedded in Oumuamua's original signal. It was spreading. The network had awakened. And through every new pulse, every coded flicker, one idea echoed louder than any human broadcast. We were never the first to send a message into the star. We were the first to reply. As the world slowly turned, a new day dawned. The Pacific was calm, the skies silent, and the stars distant but watching. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, something watched back. Because Oumuamua didn't just turn back, it turned us on. If this story made you question what's really out there, hit subscribe and let us know your theory in the comments. What do you think this all means? Was Oumuamua a messenger or a warning?